DP World Tour preview show. I am your host, Mark Hill, and I'm joined not by one, but two guests this week with Tom Jacobs and Craig Thomson joining me. Very good welcome to you guys. How are you getting on this evening?
Mark, I've been better. I'm not going to lie to you. Nothing to do with the golf. I'm sure we'll come on to it in a minute. When you asked me what my podcast juice of the week is, it's going to be my own tears. So it's been a tough afternoon, a tough evening, but I'm all the better for speaking to you this evening, Craig.
Excellent. And Craig, podcast juice for you tonight. I believe it's a Scottish one, so not fall into those stereotypes.
The old stereotypical Iron Brew, as you do. I was on a Holston before, but I've turned to the Iron Brew just now. So yeah, I'm all good. I'm all good, Mark. Thanks for having me on. It's
pleasure to have you both. I say we'll talk about where you guys are putting out your own content as we get through the show. Yes, as Tom touched upon, Nottingham Forest. Yeah, disappointing tonight. Championship tears were shed, but. Yeah, playoffs. See how they go.
We look like we were going to go down at the start of the season, so anything's a bonus. Stevie Cooper is taking us to the pinnacle, and we almost got there and let ourselves down. But maybe we will end up playing against Middlesbrough in the semi-finals if you can somehow get into that sixth place spot.
That's it. As a Borough fan, I'm fairly sceptical about what sort of lineup Sheffield United are going to face against Fulham, who obviously also secured their promotion status last night. And then Craig, you're a Hearts fan as well, so we'll stick on the soccer theme for a while. You've got a cup final to look forward to as well. So
cup final against the mighty Glasgow Rangers. We finished well. Season's still going on, but. We're currently about 19 points clear in third place. Guaranteed European football with the Scottish Cup final as well. So we're guaranteed at least 6 games in the UEFA Conference League next year. So that's something to look forward to. But it's been a good season.
Sounds good. No more Lithuanian owners these days in Hearts. I honestly don't know these days who like what the ownership of the club is like. I just remember back in the day the Lithuanians.
So since 2013, we have had Anne Budge as our owner until she kind of took a back seat last year when we become fan owned.
Right. Okay. So. Yeah, not a bad pathway to go down. And there's definitely, I think, away from the soccer side of things, there's definitely a joke to be made about an Englishman, an Irishman, and a Scotsman on this podcast this evening. Listen, I think, Tour Junkies wise, a little bit of a shout out to the preview shows that DB and Pat have put together this week, and obviously the Corn Ferry Tour content that the kid Gareth Simmons continues to put out. So if you haven't jumped on those, give them a listen. In terms of ourselves, we are for the Betfred British Masters this week, and I think I'll just jump into the course breakdown, and you guys can jump in and add to it as and when we get into it. So we're at the Belfry, the Brabazon course, par 72, 7,328 yards. 12 par 4s, water in place on half the holes at Sutton Coldfield. Hosted the Ryder Cup back in the day, long time ago now, 4 occasions in total. 2002, we have to look back to the last time it was a Ryder Cup venue. More recently, seen it in back-to-back years. The UK Championship was what we call the hodgepodge of the COVID year in 2020, and then last year for the British Masters in 2021. Parkland's track, relatively narrow fairways, tricky enough, rough to navigate at times. Bentpoa greens that typically very, very good condition, negates the need to be a strong putter per se. Richard Bland, obviously fairly historic victory last year at 150-1, a price we're not going to see about Blandy anytime soon. And then winning scores typically ranging 11 under to 15 under. Weather side of things seems to be relatively fine for the week. Don't know if you guys have been on the Windfinder or any other outlets to double check on that. A little bit of rain here and there, mild enough temperatures.
I think it's supposed to be 17 degrees at the weekend.
Going to pick up a bit of extra ball flight for a few guys, maybe. We'll see.
Okay.
Key stats I've looked at. So strong GIR performer, want someone to be getting plenty of looks on these scoreable greens. Strokes gain approach. So we look back last year's tournament, Bland was second in the field. Guido was second. Skylar's favourite, was second, and seventh. Last year Guido was in second place with 7 for strokes gained approach, and Miko Corhinen, who I believe one of us is tipping up later this evening, was T3 and graded out first for strokes gained approach. So approach numbers definitely seem to be a trend to follow on this week. To emphasise that, then Rasmus Højgaard back in the 2020 UK Championship ranked out fourth for strokes gained approach, and T3 pair that year, Benjamin Hebert and Martin Keimer, graded out first and second respectively. So plenty to like about strokes gained approach numbers this week. British Masters venue, it's rotated plenty of times. Brought back in 2015. All winners have registered at least 2 top 20s in their previous 10 outings, while Marcus Kinholt's the one exception. Everyone else had recent top 3 finishes within their last number of competitions. Of 12 down here, but I think it's less than that. Course form doesn't look to be overly important. Again, don't know if you guys are waiting that too much. We've seen debut winners here 4 times in the past, and only Angel Cabrera really had anything of note coming in previous years. Correlating courses is an interesting one. So from my perspective, I've looked at some of the recent trickier course management type setups. Kenya Open spring to mind for me. I've seen other outlets list Loch Lomond back in the day, Dom Pedro Vitoria for the Portuguese Masters, some correlation. What do you guys land on in terms of correlations or key stats that you've looked at this week? Tom, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so for me, I think you hit the nail on the head. It seems silly to say every week that strokes gained approach is important because you can't really win without hitting your irons well, right? But it is. So you obviously listed off all the people that played well last year with their irons and the subsequent success that they had. One of my long shots this week was actually inside that top 10 for that number last year as well. So I look forward to coming to him. In terms of course correlations, I tried not to get too far involved in it, actually. I think normally I'm so heavily invested in that sort of thing, and I think it's good to identify some long shots. But I've tried not to get too caught up in it just recently, because I feel like I've kind of paralysed myself a little bit trying to find people that are kind of linked in all those courses. And I think you hit the nail on the head, right? You just need to be in good form, and most of my selections kind of follow that trait. So I've gone with guys that generally play well in England. I think that's really important. I think there are certain guys that really don't play well when it comes to coming over to England and the UK, and there's some that just elevate their games massively, and that's kind of what I've focused around this week.
Yeah, that's fair. What about you, Craig? Anything in particular you landed on when you were looking at the stats and previous winners and everything else?
No, just with the Belfry being a kind of iconic course as such, kind of looking at the similar type of traditional courses, that kind of thing. And in terms of key stats, just your usual. Obviously, as Tom alluded to there, approach plays, obviously, we go on about that every week as golf punters. But out with that, I thought par 4 scoring was interesting. There's 12 par 4s. It's going to be a tough test, as we already know. So par 4 scoring was one of the main ones. I also put down obviously strong tee to green game as well. Is going to be key. Oh shit! Sorry. Oh, sorry. I do apologise for
it's all
two cardinal sins.
I can put the explicit rating on. It's fine. We're all good.
I did say previously I wasn't going to swear, and 8 minutes in, there we go. There's the first.
It's okay. You make it a free for all for us now. We can get a bit loose with the language now that it's going to be explicit. It's all good. It's all good.
Typical Scotsman, then, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's where the joke was in at the start of the episode, wasn't it? Another thing I kind of thought was interesting, Craig, just to cut you off a little bit there, is that I think you alluded to the kind of par 4s, and I think the risk reward on some of the holes at this course is really important. So I think that although we're looking for guys that are kind of focusing on accuracy and good irons, I think people that can take advantage of those risk and reward holes towards the end, and maybe taking advantage of getting some eagles where they can is really important. So again, that kind of came into my thinking.
I think that 10th hole. I think that 10th hole is fantastic, and I wrote to that. That hole in general, that whole risk and reward.
Yeah, I think it was my downfall last week, putting too much weight into accuracy. I thought it was going to be that course management style, narrower fairways, and I put far too much weight, and 4 of my 5 selections missed the cut, which much to my demise. And then Adri Arnhouse obviously goes on to win the tournament, and not necessarily the most accurate off the tee. And I had been on Arnhouse on a couple of occasions in previous weeks.
I decided to go the week
jump
before
off.
on Arnhouse.
Yeah,
which was a shame, and that's kind of been in my line of thinking, Mark, with who I've gone for this week, is to not jump off people too soon, because I think that, especially the DP World Tour now, I think because some of the more solid golfers have kind of stayed out on the PGA Tour, so you've got the likes of Fleetwood and Fitzpatrick and Hatton are really making their sort of way on the American Tour at the moment. I think it's making way for these kind of real talented maidens to just keep putting back-to-back performances together, and eventually they get over the line, right? I mean, the couple that are due to come now are the South Africans in Becker and Henny du Plessis. I'm sure we'll come on to in a moment, but that there's a very obvious Englishman at the top for me that kind of has a chance soon as we get onto him.
Yeah, and that sort of brings us nicely to the top of the betting board. So I've looked at DraftKings Sports Odds just before we've gone live. Robert McIntyre 20-1, Sam Horsfield, Jordan Smith, and Adrian Moronka 25-1. There's been a few other names up towards the top of the board. Quite a bit of odds movement. I think seems to be quite a bit of market disagreement around different golfers this week, which is fairly refreshing. And we sit in 35-1 bar, I think, on DraftKings Sportsbook at the minute with 6 different golfers at 35-1, or certainly it was just before I logged on. It's one of those ones. Have you guys landed on anyone in particular up the top of the board? Craig, how about your fellow Scotsman, Bobby McIntyre?
Was he like in 20-1, 25-1 range? He's obviously, there's no denying his ability. Robert McIntyre he is fantastic when he really is playing well. But I just think for a player of his supposed ability to only win once on the DP World Tour, it wasn't even a stroke play event either. He's still not won a stroke play event on the DP World Tour, and for him to be such short favourite compared to other proven winners in the field, I don't get it. And I'm just going to put that out here. He's going to be my obvious fade this week. I don't like the price for him.
It's funny, as part of my prep, I listened back to last year's Lost for Words podcast, and I think your co-host Jason said Robert McIntyre's just not very good. Is that? And again, that Cyprus Showdown event, he emphasised that what's the relevance or importance to that to stroke play. And Tom, how do you think about Bobby Mac this week?
It's funny because Jason actually just keeps telling me he's going to win the Open. He doesn't tell me which year he's going to win it, but he tells me he's going to win the Open. But it's interesting, McIntyre, because I generally think he's overrated. In the market. And this time, I actually thought when he opened up at 25-1 and everyone was kind of 25-1 and bigger, I actually thought it was quite tempting because you look at his kind of current form, and he had the 9th at the Ras Al Khaimah, which you'd expect him to do a little bit better in. But then he's been over in America and 15th at Riviera, 35th at Valero, and 23rd at the Masters. Like, it depends how much stock you put in PGA Tour finishes over DP World Tour, right, Mark? I know you kind of do the weightings an awful lot and sort of things, and I think a 15th place finish at Riviera is huge, right? So I think he's got an obvious chance. I think he's better when he's got an obvious place to unleash the driver and maybe take advantage of more par 5s and things like that, instead of having to rely on maybe a bit more of a tidy short game. And having said that, you can win with negative putting strokes as we've got as we've shown last year. But I think it's tough. I think the trouble with McIntyre at the moment, he's kind of caught in that range where he's trying to go for PGA Tour status, and that really threw him off as he went to the Corn Ferry Tour finals last year. Obviously, he has bounced back from that now, so I think it's a real true test now to see if he can win or at least contend this week to really show that he is one of the main guys on this tour, because he's got a busy summer of golf coming up. Scottish and Irish Open, you've got the Open Championship, you've got a real good run of events before you get to kind of Wentworth and France and things like that. He's got it all to play for, and it's just whether he kind of dips a toe in each market or whether he kind of stays at home and plays the DP World Tour. I think in terms of the 3 that we just got flashed up there, McIntyre, Horsfield, Smith 4, and Adrian Moronk, I think Horsfield's still the one with the most potential, right? I think he's the most obvious candidate to have success on the PGA Tour. I think he grew up there. He was very, very impressive. Obviously, Ian Poulter pointed out early on in his career. So I do think he's the most ready built for it. But I guess Moronk of the four is the most solid shout, right? I think he's the most obvious to go on and get the next win. It's just he has the same problems as the people that we're going to come and talk about, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. Like Moronk opened 30-1 with DraftKings, down to 25-1 now. So a bit of support. Did go down to 22-1, back out to 25-1. Back-to-back third place finishes, Qatar and Catalonia, third here last year. So obvious credentials for Moronk. Again, one of these golfers, we're just trying to see whether he can get over the line. The Bobby Mack stuff, like obviously the Corn Ferry setbacks last year, we've seen it in the flesh in terms of, I remember he was heavily backed or heavily touted for the Alfred Dunhill coming home, a couple of weeks off in Oban, thought he was going to be relaxed and play well. Didn't quite work out for him there. Opened up 2022, back-to-back missed cuts. He seems to have got a bit of a comfort zone back, or a bit of a comfort level back, a bit more confidence in his game. I can't rule it out. And obviously he's had market support, so somebody fancies him out there. I don't know if Ben Coley put him up this week or who's been on Bobby Mack, but he definitely has the market support, which is encouraging. 8th place finish here last year, including a second round 66, so we know he can shoot low at the course. Again, the price point though, it puts me off entirely. Up the top of the board at the minute for him. Horsfield, one of the first names I was drawn to when I looked at the betting card. It's that question mark over why he had that sizable layoff. He shot a 64 on the opening day at the Saudi Invitational before withdrawing on day 2. Seasonal reappearance then at the Zurich Classic. Probably not the worst format. They carry Matt Wallace along to a top 20 finish. But probably not the worst format. If it was an injury that he was battling or something going on with his game, at least you can settle into that team format. But do you have faith to put 4 single rounds back to back for Horsfield at the top of the board? As you say, all the credentials in the world are just hesitant enough. Now, it could be a live bet, could be one that we see it in day one and he looks fairly comfortable and solid and swings there, everything else. I think Horsfield's definitely got credentials. Jordan Smith, again, obvious credentials there this week. Top 20 finish last week in Catalonia. Solid all round this year, accurate off the tee, pounding greens in regulation. Did miss the cut at the Belfry in 2020, then top 20 last year. Just a lot to like about Jordan Smith generally. Again, probably another win coming sooner rather than later. But I think all of us are kind of looking down the board a little bit when we're looking for value. So why not jump into the outright selections? Who wants to kick it off? Any nominees? Who's coming in at a decent
I'll fire
price?
it off just because I like pain and I feel like I'm going to endure some this week. I actually thought this was probably one of the first weeks that, because it was 25-1 and bigger, this week, I actually felt like everyone was kind of priced relatively, accurately. I kind of felt like there wasn't too many surprises, and it was kind of just pinning your mask to the one that you really wanted to go for. And in the end, I just went with Laurie Cantor, and I don't necessarily know why. I sort of said last week I didn't want to put him in because I didn't actually trust him on Sunday. That obviously paid off in the end. But there was a certain time opening on Sunday when he sort of opened with Birdie Eagle that I thought that maybe I'd made the wrong decision. He's now 33 times, obviously slightly shorter, but that's coming in after another really good showing. And I just think you just seen Adrian now get over the line. He's the sort of next one in line to do that. I think Ryan Fox has been playing well. He's the sort of same sort of mould as him. He was 4th after 36 holes at the UK Championship here before having a poor weekend, and actually he's been really positive on social media, which I think is huge. Like normally, if I was Laurie Cantor, I'd be hiding until my Thursday tea time in a dark room somewhere, crying myself to sleep. But he obviously seems quite happy with what he was doing. And, maybe because he's kind of a victim of his own success, right? He's been there so often recently that because he's not getting over the line, he looks bad. And, maybe one more week and he gets it done and people's minds completely change. So I think Laurie Cantor at 33-1 for me is the way to go. I'm still kind of doubting myself every time I put Laurie Cantor up. But here he is. He's there. And I can confirm Ben Cody did put Robert McIntyre up. So that was the market movement.
That would make sense. Yeah, as we know, if we load up Odds Checker over here in the UK and see those blue screens, it's typically Ben Coley, and it's tipping up. Cantor, plenty to like. plenty to like. And I guess if we're saying the short game's not as important this week, potentially, then he could be right in the mix. I guess we take the strokes gain data in the last number of now months at this stage
All season,
with a pinch of salt. I believe Matt or strokes gain is it strokes gain T to Green on Twitter says this week we're getting back to the proper strokes gain data, which will be welcomed. I know some of us follow the Sunshine Tour and that side of things, and it's interesting.
Dubious is the best word for it,
yeah, dubious to say the least. Especially when we're trying to model or trying to put things together, and we're trying to take strokes gain stuff from different sources. It's an interesting one. Cantor, it was kind of on my provisional shortlist, didn't quite get there. What about yourself, Craig? Who's going to kick off your card tonight?
So I'm going to go for a certain player who's in very, very good form. Recent winner, hits at a country mile, but is also one of the least accurate players ever. It's Ryan Fox. I quite like Ryan Fox this week. He's just playing very, very well. Sometimes you would expect if you win, sometimes they're going to fall off a cliff. But in Fox's case, he's gone tied 15th and tied 9th directly after the win at the Ras Al Khaimah Classic. So I thought that was pretty impressive stuff. He's just played superb this year, to be honest. In terms of his season stats, he's 14th for strokes gained approach, 29th for par 4 scoring, 20th for tee to green, 53rd for off the tee as well. That's all according to the DP World Tour season stats. So he's just playing really well. I like that he had the tie 9th at the tough PGA Catalonia last week, tie 15th at the ISPS Handa in Spain as well. So he's just really playing well. He also had a tie 28th at the 2020 ISPS Handa UK at the Belfry. So everything points away to another good showing for Ryan Fox.
Yeah, I think when it comes to tour winners, obviously to back that up with a couple of top 20 finishes and one a top 10 finish, like that's fairly impressive in itself. Nice little layoff in between as well, which it's obviously suited him well. On that theme, I'm on someone who's a long hitter, but not always the most accurate, and I'm on Dean Burmeister, 35-1 with DraftKings Sportsbook. For me, 12 par 4s in play. Why not land on the golfer that grades out number 1 in the field this season, especially on my numbers? I say we'll take some of the Sunshine Tour data with a pinch of salt. Not seen him since the Qatar Masters, where he finished T40th. Knocking on the door before that, couple of runners-up finish this year, the Stein City Championship and Dimension Data Pro-Am. Despite not being the most accurate off the tee, as I said, I learned the hard way last week that I'm maybe putting too much weight into accuracy at some of these course management setups. And it's curious what you say there about the form over those two tracks last week. Yes, they were both in Spain, but really fairly contrasting layouts and conditions and everything else, which I always find interesting from a handicap perspective. How do you guys approach that? Like, do you put more weight into the Catalunya event because there is that little bit more course management at play, or do you sort of grade them out equally, or what way would you approach it yourselves?
I just kind of treat it as a completely different leg now. I think before I was kind of I kind of took Catalonia probably a bit like the same approach as you did, that it was going to be so much obviously tougher than the week before. It was probably going to be more in that Valderrama sort of mold, and then not necessarily even exactly the same courses, but just same type of scoring. And then when you talked about, like, all three of us have kind of talked about players in Fox, Cantor and Burmeister now, that we've mentioned at the start of the show that we want people that are going to be sort of accurate and give themselves chances off the fairway, and then we've mentioned 3 players like that just hit it a country mile. But when you look at Valderrama last year, Minwoo Lee 2nd, Laurie Cantor 4th, Ryan Fox 4th, and we pigeonhole these players now in kind of, I just looked at Ryan Fox as purely a links player, or anything like that, and he actually bases himself in England, which is obviously a bonus. I'm pretty sure of that anyway. But I just think there's too much emphasis now, especially with the DP World Tour, because the schedule is so sketchy, because the the courses keep getting chucked around because there's 3 or 4 weeks layoff in between. It's really, really hard to handicap even current form, let alone course form. And do we look at British Masters form from years previous? Do we look at course form from this event on the Challenge Tour? It really does get to a point where you can kind of paralyze yourself with too much information. So I've kind of just tried to take a little bit strip back approach this week and just stick to the guys that are playing well.
Which I think leads nicely into your next selection, who myself and Craig have jumped off, having backed recently, South African Henny du Plessis. Tell me why you're sticking with Henny this week.
So Henny du Plessis came up with me and Skylar Hope did a show on the Mayor Media Network, and Sky brought him up sometime last year with one of the South African events, and I kind of just took the mick because it sounds like the guy out of Wild at Heart, right? And that's all I could think of was Anders du Plessis, and ever since then he's just turned into this incredibly good golfer, and I just think that the form will drop off. Like, there's no question about it. Him and Oliver Becker will suffer a massive drop off in form. What I did like to see was the fact that he's shown that form in Spain, outside of South Africa, which is massive for these guys. And actually, when you look back at his Challenge Tour performances last year in continental Europe, they were really impressive as well. Still 40-1, sort of 45-1 about him. 6th, 25th, 27th, 2nd, 3rd, and 6th in recent form. Like, eventually, he's going to he's almost going to stumble across one. It feels like it's happened to Arnaus. It's going to happen to Cantor. It's probably going to happen to du Plessis if he can keep the form up. Like, I think eventually, like the Sunday that he had was just incredible after 2 really bad 74s. Like, because he's just playing so well, eventually it's going to click. And until he has that kind of miscut or 50th place finish, I'm just going to stick with du Plessis for now.
That's fair. My next selection is at 50-1. Did open up at 70-1. Where are you sort of in that price point again, Craig, or who's up next on your card?
50-1. It's experienced Finn Mikko Korhonen. I think that's how you say it. But
it's a good effort, yeah.
A Scot trying to pronounce accent, it's never good. But no, I like. I kind of valued the reason why I went off du Plessis was kind of valued more experience with it being a kind of classical course. And I felt, especially at this kind of range, Korhonen stood out, especially with his tied 3rd last year at the British Masters. He's actually played quite well, to be fair. To be fair to him, tied 33rd last week, tied 15th at the event in Spain previously. Tied 67th at a tough Qatar Masters. I suppose you can let him away with that one because all players suffered really. Tied 10th at Stain City. So he's playing well. I also like that he's 4th for driving accuracy. I think accuracy is going to be quite key. I forgot to say that previously, but I think that's going to be quite key. I believe Richard Bland was in the top 5 for accuracy last year at the Belfry. He ranks 4th for the season in driving accuracy, 23rd for greens in regulation. He's also 23rd for par 4 scoring. So there's a lot to like about the experienced Finn.
Nice, yeah. Accuracy definitely had him on my side last week. He was the one golfer out of the 5 that I put up on the show that actually did make the cut and put in a fairly sterling effort, falling away a bit, I think, on the final day because I had a top 20 bet on him and it didn't land. But yeah, plenty to like, yeah. Made my card a few times this year already. I did fade him on a couple of tracks, but he definitely seems to be trending in the right direction. The 50-1 shot I've landed on, and for some reason he opened up 70-1, that's Marcus Armitage. If we're putting any weight into the strong approach game, then he's right up there amongst the best in the field. Miscut last year after an open round of 76. Miscut last week. Both played into that. I think that inflated price about Armitage when it opened up at 70-1. I'm still happy to have a nibble at 50-1 on him. Plenty of appeal overall. 7th UK Championship event that was played here. Also enjoyed other top 20s in England back at the Hero Open, English Championship in that 2020 lockdown year, so comfortable enough on home soil. Picked up his maiden victory as well. Got that a monkey off the back there at the Porsche European Open in 2021. That was played over 3 rounds, but tricky enough track and recorded a 65 on the final day to win by 2 shots. just a golfer that I think again is probably on the cusp of another victory this tournament year. I think the price point is fairly nice about him, and happy enough to get involved. Any of you guys any feedback on Armitage? I know some of you have backed him this year already.
My problem with Armitage is every time I back him, it goes poorly. So what I do is I just don't back him. So when he wins, inevitably I'll feel bad. Hopefully it's this week for you. Look, his irons are incredible, right? And he's driving strong. He's a little bit of a head case, and I think the thing with Armitage was I could see him going down the Andrew Johnston route, where it was kind of like there was all this attention on them as he was buying into this beef thing, and Armitage was buying into this bullet thing, and if he'd got out into America, there'd been all this massive fan for them, and I just think that it actually detracts from their game an awful lot, and I think Armitage had built really, really solid game after a long time of taking his time to get out there. And I just felt like he was getting a little bit away from what got him there. He's now kind of focused back in, and I think that's kind of showed off in his results. So, yep, I do like him. I think he's good. I just can never get him right, so I don't even bother trying.
So it's Saul's law that we've both been there. Like I'm sure Craig has as well. Like 1 week, yeah, really, really fancy a golfer. Next week, put him up. Nah, I think I'll fade him this week. Yeah, what is he going to do? Wins. You guys this year on your respective podcasts, have you had any outright winners so far this year? Because 2022 for me has been a year of losing playoffs. Like a couple of guys have been up there, second place. Even Aaron Cockrell a couple of weeks ago, 125-1, right in the mix, led during the final day before capitulating a little bit down the backstretch. But have you guys had any outright winners this year so far?
So had Thomas Peters in Abu Dhabi, which was nice. So I was really, really keen on him, and it paid off dividends. And I think one of Brad or Jace had one as well, but I can't remember who. But my main thing's been on the PGA Tour. I've had a really good season on there. So DP World Tour is just so hard, Mark. Right? I don't even think we can be too hard on ourselves because it's just incredible. Like the players. The trouble is, like I said at the start of the show, like all these guys at the top of the market deserve to be there, but by the same token, none of them like winning. They're all kind of, allergic to winning. They're allergic to getting over the line. When you start saying that Dean Burmester looks like one of the more solid people in contention, you've got problems, right? So there's players that we won't even really we won't even talk upon. Like Thomas Dietrich is going to have to get a win at some point. Lee Westwood's come back and he's slot straight in at 33-1. Like that's if anyone knows the Belfry, it's this Lee Westwood. He was actually part of that Ryder Cup that you mentioned earlier. So was Thomas Bjorn, who played well last week. So I just think it's such a crapshoot, Mark. It's so hard. And as much as I love to be confident about selections, and obviously we give as much analysis as we can, I think it is really, really hard to get a win on a DP World Tour.
That's fair. What about yourself, Craig? Have you landed much this year?
Yeah, just the same as Tom. I was also in Peters in Abu Dhabi. Which I actually had the 1-2 that week. I had Rafa Cabrera Bell as well, who was 90-1. Tie second. I was also close the week after that at the Dubai Desert Classic when I had a certain Richard Bland at 100-1. bloody Victor Hovland, come on! But no, it's just been more. It's just been more this year. It's just been more places more than anything. To be honest, I had a great chance with Henny Duplessis at 100-1 at that Peakenwood event as well, where he had a 2-shot lead. Lara Fabal obviously was like a train that week and he won, but Duplessis was tied 6th there. So yeah, it's just been a recurring theme for me this year, to be honest. But I have had a couple of other successes on the PGA Tour, but just the one so far.
Nice. I don't know how you gentlemen find the time for a bit of Sunshine Tour here and there, a bit of PGA Tour, and obviously the DP World Tour. I've been in the office from 7:15 this morning. I'm now sat here 11:15 at night. Don't get the time for PGA anymore.
I must admit, I am finding it harder now. I've got a proper job, but it's it is tough, right? I think the thing is that you really do have to dedicate. And I think the thing is with the DP World Tour is that you can get yourself down quite quickly if you're so sure on the selections and they don't come in. But I think as long as you get in places, you're getting close to the kind of top 10s every week. I think you're doing the right things. It's just a lot of weekend luck on the DP World Tour, so I tend not to get myself too down. I think the PGA Tour, I'm always a little bit more confident in selections and kind of expecting more. So that's kind of where I go. But the DP World Tour is so much more. I think the puzzle is harder, and I think there's more satisfaction when you actually get it right.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head in terms of the puzzle side of things. Like all these golf heads. I'll put DB and Pat into that mix as well. They don't know how blessed they are with consistent PGA data. It's a different world.
Proper stats, all in America. The only thing they've got to worry about is the grass types, and we've got to worry about different countries and different Brexit rules and all sorts. It's
that's why we love it. I guess we'll fly through. I don't know, you guys have put up some other other selections on your own personal shows. I'm going to land on a triple-digit number, widely available 100-1. Daniel Gavins is my final outright selection this week. Did open up 110-1. That's still available on Bet365. So I backed Gavins a couple of weeks ago, missed the cut. In hindsight, then I jumped off and really shouldn't have. A fairly solid performance last week. Had the win at Galgorm, fairly tricky enough track, about 20 minutes up the road from me in Northern Ireland. Couple of impressive performances, obviously Catalonia last week. Spoke to you guys at the start of the show. Magical Kenya Open, a little bit of a trickier track this year. 10 under par, so in and around those target scores on his way to a T6 finish. Read the quotes on the DP World Tour website. So DP World Tour, for any of the US audience, they regularly do a weekly blog from a different golfer, and read through his comments on there, and he says he's been working hard on the short game recently, and that seems to have improved in terms of his recent ranks. So that's bearing some fruit. Again, if we're going to go back to the approach side of things, that was a standout in the strokes gained category. First, again, we're taking these with a pinch of salt at times. First of the Dubai Championship on strokes gained approach. First the Kenya Open. Second last week at Catalonia. So fairly strong approach numbers. Lives about 90 minutes away from the Belfry. 2020 missed cut here. After back-to-back 76s, but I'm not really going to have that held against him. I think once you've had a look and you get settled in, and he's in a very different headspace and very, very different golfer to where he was in 2020. Now that he's had that tour win, generally consistent form, and you're still getting him at a triple-digit number week to week. I'm very happy to be on Gavins this time around. Where have you? Sorry, yeah.
I think the thing with Gavins is, like, when you see a player finally get a win who's not had any threat of losing their card, which the sole focus has been on the fact they haven't been able to win right, I think there's a different mentality. Whereas when they finally get that win, we kind of see them tail off. But I listen to the PGA Tour at the moment, like just struggling ever since winning at Torrey Pines, right? But with Daniel Gavins, it was like, he got that win, and that actually gives him security for the first time in his career, and that kind of takes the pressure off. And despite the fact it was in a lower grade, it kind of gives them a platform. Goes on to finish, 6th in the Dunhill Links, 6th in Kenya, like you mentioned, 11th for Valderrama. That's some really, really solid results for someone that hasn't really been doing it, at this level for a long time. And he's either got the most generous caddy in the world in terms of strokes gained numbers, or he is actually flying. He is the only one player probably on tour that I think if I stepped in and putted for him, his scores might actually improve. But other than that, I
don't know. Eduardo Molinari could also call.
He's another one. Yeah, I could. I wouldn't want to tell Eduardo Molinari that though, because I feel like he's a bit of a head case.
And Eduardo Molinari, I don't know if he made your final card, Craig. You definitely put him up on your own show this week.
I did.
But who did make your final selection?
Well, I'm afraid to say, Molinari did make the card on my actual show. I obviously do enjoy pain, so I'll take that with a pinch of salt that he goes well. But the last one for me at 125-1, which I feel is a good price, to be fair, is fellow compatriot Ewan Ferguson. I think, yet again, this is going with DP World Tour season stats, so take it with a pinch of salt. We know what that's like. I think his stats in general this season are far better than what his results are kind of are finishing off at. He currently is 41st for approach, 43rd for par 4 scoring, 58th for tee to green, 47th off the tee. But the ones I really like were 10th for driving accuracy and 9 for greens in regulation. So he's actually playing far better than what his results suggest. And although his last 2 results since winning in Qatar have been a miscut and a tie 52nd, I guess with a first-time winner, that's the sort of thing you can expect to happen. So I just think a return to UK soil and at an event where I think scoring's it's not going to be obviously it's not going to be high scoring at all, low scoring at all. Sorry, it's going to be probably between 10, maybe 15 under. I think with that win where he was at Qatar, where he was 7 under. I felt like that was a tick in his box for him for me to back him this week. So, also I want to see him do well, being a fellow Scot, but he is a very good player, and I think it's a good price, to be fair.
Yeah, big time. Like if you talk about is there value about Bobby Mack at 20-1, or is there value about someone who's won recently on tour at 125-1? If we're getting into that conversation and back on is it controversial to say home soil? We say home soil, British soil. Yeah,
we'll say home soil.
We'll say
I don't upset anyone, but on Ewan Ferguson, we mentioned that 52nd last week, but he was 16th after 54 holes, right? Like, and annoyingly, like all his finishes before that, like 61st, the 40th, like he was playing some really good golf. I remember being on him a couple of times, and just watching him kind of capitulate on a Sunday or a Saturday and throw himself out of it. And annoyingly, the 1 week I didn't back him was in Qatar, and I was in New York and missed it, right? But it was just one of those things. It was coming, I thought, even though the results. And this is one of those things I say about hidden form. Like I use the stats site and go round by round, and he's a very good example of looking at what he's done first, second, third round and see where it's gone wrong, because it wasn't always on a Sunday. It wasn't necessarily just under pressure either. So I think the upside on Ewan Ferguson's been there for a long time, and he's finally realising it.
Who rounds out your card, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple, but I think people have seen the David Coupland shout on Twitter and he's slashed in prices, so we'll leave that one where it is. But I think Eddie Pepperell is really worth talking about, because he was a popular selection last week. He shot 65 on Sunday in the first Spanish event, and people kind of jumped on. And I remember speaking to Skyler about it and sort of saying, is it, a flash in the pan, or is he kind of back? And, people might argue that when he shoots 73, 74 last week, it was a flash in the pan, but he missed the cut on the number. He now comes back to, the UK soil, where he just plays. He's a different golfer. 50% of his top 20 world golf ranking finishes have come on UK and Ireland. He's won the British Masters before. He's come second in it as well. He was actually leading here after 54 holes last year, before a disaster on the Sunday as well. 6th at Wentworth, 6th at the Open. He just plays his best golf in the biggest UK events. And I'm willing to give him a chance that what he showed in the first leg of that Spanish swing is actually what Eddie Pepperell is doing right now. And I thought the big prices available on him, sort of 141, 151 and bigger. I know there was 200 to 1 about him yesterday when we spoke about it on the DraftKings Sportsbook. So I actually really like Eddie Pepperell.
Yeah, lovely shout. And I know we're sort of dragging on the show a little bit, so let's jump into some DFS chat if I can get my captions lined up. I don't have producer Sam here. So typically the DB and Pat put up 3 selections each and a fade in each range. I don't think we're going to go that granular tonight. We'll be here to midnight. Anyone jumping out to you guys in the 9K range, either from a back or fade perspective this week?
Yeah, so for me, I'll start it off. I actually think Sam Horsfield's a good play. I think that if I was, I do consider backing him betting wise, but I think he's quite a solid golfer. If he's back fit and back playing well, and I think he can kind of get those low scoring weekend rounds in. And, I think the ownership might be pretty high on Oliver Becker, but I think he's worth playing as well at 9,100. If I was going to fade anyone in the kind of 9K plus range, I guess, would you sort of look against Adrian Arnaus, based on the fact that he's just got that big win in his home soil? Don't know quite how he celebrated it. It's going to go one or two ways with him. He's either going to go back it up really well, or he's going to miss the cut. I don't think there's any middle ground with Arnaus. So with that in mind, I will probably fade him.
Yeah, I'd be on the same boat in terms of the fade in this category. I've learned to my detriment before. 1 week I'm on house, does well. Fade him the next week, doesn't do, or vice versa. Like I remember last year, open to Madrid, I put him up as a fade. Really categorically put him up on a fade based on that accuracy characteristic. Went extremely well. Stuck to my guns the following week. Faded him again at Valderrama and absolutely flopped. So I'm hoping it's one of those cases where he's coming off a good tournament and then gets that monkey off the back. A little bit of a distraction on home soil as well. Bear in mind that might have been a late arrival, a little bit of a sore head, possibly back from home.
I'm hoping so. I hope he celebrated it, and not only has he had a good time, but also he's ruined his chances of playing well this week.
Yeah, and I think from a back perspective, obviously, between us, we've put up the likes of Ryan Fox there. We've talked about Sam Horsfield. I put up Burnley at 9-2. Sorry, Craig, is there anyone you'd fade in that? Well, obviously Bobby Max, your obvious fade, I guess, in that 9K range.
Yeah, definitely. I quite
the joys of live streams. We might have lost Craig. We'll fill in case he pops back in here in a second. I'll jump down and have a look at the 8K range just while Craig's looking at a reconnection here. So Danny Willett seems the obvious phase. Hosting here this week. You're back with us, Craig.
Hello.
But I'll talk.
Hello.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you're back. You're back. I'll talk. I'm just dropped down. Talk a little bit about Danny Willett for a second here. For me, the obvious fade this week, given the distraction of hosting duties. Listen back to sort of his ramble pre-tournament on the Betfred socials, trying to promote the event, and said that last year, obviously no fans, but he said it's still a little bit of a distraction. This year, he said he's going to relish the fans being there, which just sounds like a bit of a pep talk. I think if we're brutally honest, hosting duties at this sort of event, a lot of expectation. It's an all-round distraction. I think there's other spots for Willett later in the year that will probably both be on him. I think Tom, Alfred Dunhill probably springs to mind for yourself. But yeah, I think Danny Willett's probably the obvious fade in there. Anyone drawing your eyes? You're back with us again, Craig. Is there anyone sort of 9K, 8K range drawing your attention this week?
So I was in the kind of same boat as you, Mark, thinking about Burmester at 9,200. I just think he's a better DFS pick than an outright, to be honest, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, obviously, but he's definitely a good DraftKings play. For me, anyway, I feel. But obviously, the obvious fades. It's got, as I said at the top of the show, it's probably got to be Bobby Mack, who I believe is what was he the second? Is it second most expensive?
10-6 at the minute behind Moronk.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fair. Anyone catching your eye on the 8K range? I always find the 8K range hard week to week, Tom. I don't know about you. Like obviously, it's typically 8-9 golfers that we're trying to choose between. Quite easy to get to maybe one that you can back and one that you can fade. I'm drawn to Henny Duplessis from a DraftKings perspective, but he's probably going to be quite popular. I'm going to put him up amongst my best bets later in the show. But anyone else drawing your attention there?
This would probably be where I'd put Armitage in. Actually, is kind of in the opposite to the best, and we've kind of just swapped roles, right? I'm going to bet Henny Dempsey, you're going to bet Armitage, and we'll swap them in the DraftKings. I think, interestingly enough, if I was going to have to fade someone, it's kind of hard to fade these 8K range guys. I think because of where they are, you don't necessarily need to play them anyway. But George Coetzee is really not good in England. He's actually got a really bad record. I'm just looking at his last 7 starts in the UK: 75th miscut, 71st miscut, 15th. Like, he just does not play well in the UK. I know he's the type of guy that does translate his kind of Sunshine Tour form and come back over and do well. But I think if I was going to sort of fade anyone, it would be George Coetzee, which I don't like doing normally because I do like him as a player. And I think that also that kind of solidifies what I was saying about Adrianaus as well. You look at his last 5 performances in England: miscut 60th, 32nd, 43rd, miscut. So I do like to see that about guys that, maybe easier to fade in those ranges than it is actually to pin your ass to someone definitively.
If we jump down to the 7K range there, one guy that I was drawn to, I wanted to get to him this week because he's had a baby earlier in the year. He's just about to turn 30, Johannes Veerman. But then I looked at the stats, and if we're putting any sort of weight into approach this week, he's lost on approach in 8 of his last 10 outings. I think there will be a spot for Veerman. I don't know how long we cling to this nappy factor when it comes to golfers. But certainly 30th birthday around the corner, nappy factor this year. I think there's a Johannes Veerman performance coming, just not this week. Anyone in that particular 7K range that you're drawn to? Obviously, I have Daniel Gavins. Quite a lot of love, I'd say, for Richard Mansell this week. Could be one that's on people's radar. But Craig, anyone for you that you're drawn to in that 7K range this week?
I quite like a certain Thorbjorn Olesen who is trending in the right direction. Obviously we'll not go into all the personal stuff, but he's come back for this year. He's actually playing quite well. He's only missed 2 cuts in 7 starts in 2022. We all know how good Olsen is. Five-time DP World Tour winner. He's not a 5-time DP World Tour winner for nothing at the end of the day. I just think a player of his form, he seems to be trending in the right direction, and wouldn't be surprised at all to see him go well again this week. Sorry.
Yeah, that's totally fair. We'll look very quickly at the 6K range. Eddie Pepperell is obviously your one you're drawn to there, Tom. I'm sure there's some others. If anyone hasn't caught Tom's show this week, he's got David Coupland, as I said, you've mentioned it on Twitter. It has to be in that 6K range somewhere. I'm trying to see 6'5" for Coupland. Anyone else sort of jumping out for either of you guys in the 6K range?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think this is where you could possibly look. I didn't really want to use the challenge tour leaderboard as a reason to pick anyone, but I think it's a good support system. And both Chase Hanna and Nicholas Norgard Muller played well in that English Challenge event. So, I think it was Hanna was second in Qatar, I think, to Ferguson, as we were talking about earlier. So I think that could be interesting. There was a couple in just at the early 7Ks as well I just wanted to mention. I thought that Yannick Paul was interesting. I think he's playing some good golf. You mentioned Richard Mansell, I was going to, but obviously very popular there. And Lucas Nemeth as well. I think has been really, really solid. So I think for a DraftKings play, he could be good. I think once you start to get down to this 6K range in events like this, I think you're starting to struggle because it's hard to be have such conviction on players in this range. Marcel Seymour always used to kind of pop up in big events in the UK, and he could go well. Lorenzo Gagli is playing okay now. So if I had to mention a couple of names just for mentioning sakes, they would be those. But I don't think we need to give any fades here because most of them are going to be in danger of missing the cut.
Yeah, I did actually have fades in Kawamura and Gurrier. I expect them to be in the 7K range, but I think DraftKings are on the button there in terms of dropping them into the 6K range this week. And obviously Skyler's favourite Guido's in there. What about yourself, Craig? Anything jumping out?
I think for me, the one player I had written down was definitely Nicholas Norgard Muller. He just seems to be ultra consistent since making the step up. Obviously won his tour card last year on the Challenge Tour. I believe he's only missed 1 cut in 7 events this year on the since moving up to the DP World Tour. So he's certainly a type of player that you could look at this week from a DFS perspective. I guess the running joke for me would be Raphael Jacquelin. I know we're looking at making looking at the weekend, but Jacquelin seems to start off like a train, and I don't know what it is just now. He seems to start off like a train and then fade away. But experience. Blandy wins at 48 years old. Raphael Jacquelin's only 47.
That's mind-boggling, by the way. He's still only 47 years of age. One person's going to split opinion. I know, Craig, you've already spoken about him this week. Andy Sullivan. If you look at just location form, Andy Sullivan loves playing in the UK. Second best, well, probably the best player in that time. But he's just been torrid this season, like absolutely terrible. So I could argue he'd be a fade. he's the type of person that can either win or lose you this week. He can either be that person that stops you getting 6 out of 6, or he could be the guy that gets the job done. He's probably that definitive. So I will go against him just because I've got to pick a fade in there. But yeah, it's tough.
I think the fade for me, although it's going to break my heart, it's got to be Guido.
I won't tell Sky if you don't. It's all right.
It's all right. I hope he makes the weekend because, well, I'm going to the Belfry on Saturday, so I want to see him in the flesh again. I want to see him in the flesh again because it's Guido. So.
Well, in fairness, he might not have as many followers this week, so you can get some space around the course and watch.
You get a good look at him if you like.
Front row view.
Listen, look, guys, we're closing in on the hour, so let's jump to our best bets. Top 20s, derivatives, head-to-heads, anything jumping out in particular. I'll kick it off this week. Sort of torn between top 20s for Henny Duplessis and Dean Burmeister. I'm going to stick to my guns with Burmeister. Generally speaking, looking plus 200 or 3.00 decimal odds or higher. I can see FanDuel out there at 3.8. That's going to be my best bet, top 20 market for Dean Burmeister. Where's your best bets this week, fellas?
So I think for me, Dave Coupland, as much as I do want him to go in as an outright, I think realistically a top 20 bet is probably the way to go. He was 16th after 54 holes last week, probably trying to flag hunts, trying to decide that top 10. But just his last 6 starts in England, he's made 5 cuts, 3rd, 9th, 15th, 28th and 53rd. So, he's always in the mix for a kind of top 20 when he's playing in England. He was 3rd here last year and 28th in the UK Championship as well. So 9-1 at the UK price. Not quite sure on the US. I probably should know that as well. But 9-1 for a top 20 was kind of appealing to me.
Sounds good. And what about yourself, Craig?
I'm actually quite intrigued in James Morrison, to be fair, who started like a train last week, but ultimately faded and still finished at a respectable tie 33rd after it's been quite a torrid time after that tie 6 in Abu Dhabi. So it was nice to see him play well. I do think he's a player that could definitely go well at a traditional iconic course. I believe my podcast partner Jamie has him for a top 30 finish at 4-1, which is quite appealing, to be honest. But certainly top 20 could be a good way of looking at James Morrison this week.
Yeah, that's a fair shout. I'm looking here, FanDuel there at 8.00 plus 700 for a top 20. Compare that to the likes of Pinnacle, obviously a sharper book at 6.41. So there's a bit of value there. And for those that aren't aware, FanDuel are in the same network as the likes of Paddy Power and Betfair. So you're probably going to be able to get those prices on these shores as well. So nice juicy price about James Morrison to round out the show. Fellas, it's been a pleasure this week. Where can any of our listeners in the US find you? So Tom, give us a shout out about where we can find your content week to week on DP World Tour.
So you've got the Lost for Words podcast is kind of my main show. I do that with Bradley Todd and Jason Daniels for the European and PGA Tour, and then myself and Matt Vincenzi also do DraftKings PGA show, which is a new show that we've kind of launched and really getting into. Also on the Mayo Media Network with Skylar Hoke, doing the DP World Tour picks and bet show, and also writing content still for Odds Checker, the first round leader bets, which I do enjoy diving into. So yeah, that's everywhere you can find me on a week-to-week basis.
Lovely. And what about yourself, Craig?
Just a solitary podcast show, Chasing Past Golf Podcast, which I do with my co-hosts Jamie Broadhurst and Ryan Hamilton. Jamie usually goes into the PGA Tour side of things. I'm more based on the DP World Tour, although I do kind of still go into the PGA Tour. But yeah, that's my only dive into the podcast world.
Well, listen, fellas, from a content perspective, both of you are smashing it week after week. And to be honest, between the three of us, we've had. You've both had Peters this year. If this show isn't going to land on a winner, I'll be extremely disappointed. We've sort of played around on that board with a few nice outright juicy prices. some best bets that are really appealing at juicy prices as well. So fingers crossed. It's been a pleasure, fellas, bringing you on the Tour Junkies Network this week. And best of luck with your bets and hopefully some green screens as well on the DFS side of it. Thank you, gents, and all the best, everybody at home.
Mark, thank you very much. Keep up the great work.
Cheers, fellas.
See you later, mate. Thank you.